treat this kind of patient in the first hand, we say that this will actually will make this contagious disease even more dangerous, because these kind of people could not actually help or could not actually seek for advices what they should do in the first place before they could actually be treated with the voluntarism by the US government or by the UK government. So this, when we have these kind of doctors to actually give the patient the first-hand advice, we say that this could at least help this patient to make themselves better while waiting for the voluntarism that they said just now. So we from the opposition are proudly to oppose.
Thank you very much. When the case of like government is called for second speaker closing government, etc.
What OG brought to this debate is to analyze the rights of the doctor and whether they can have the right to opt out. And what CG brought exclusively to this debate is to analyze the view in terms of duty. Why even if some doctors will want to opt out or want to opt in to help these patients, we would actually encourage them to move out on a wider scale of utilitarian concerns. But before I move into what Sarah talked about, which largely received very little engagement, let's talk about opposition houses. Largely, the recurring theme is this, that doctors have a duty and risk should be taken. So, firstly, let's address this idea that risk exists anyway in your profession, in a medical profession, and therefore such risks should be taken. But those risks, right, in any risk of any profession, do not exist without what are the probable outcomes, which means we cannot just take a risk because we have to or because we want to. Those risks have to be based on a calculation. What is the consequences that will happen if we are to take this risk? And that is what Sarah's extension answers to you in this debate. But the second idea, that government has already invested in the doctors, that you already provide them training, you already give them the facilities, and you want them, expect them to fulfill their duty. We think if the government really wants to maximize its investment into doctors, maximize what they have done for the doctors, what you should do is to ensure that these doctors can have a maximum utility for you possible, which means to ensure that they don't die prematurely, which means to ensure that they at least have a basic safeguards of safety that they can still have even when they're working in the field. But then CO talked to you about the duty of care also, right? So they want us to say, when you have lesser doctors, which means when doctors start opting out to cure these patients, you have lesser people to treat these diseases. But if the contention is these doctors are so ill-intentioned, if these doctors have the incentive to opt out and not treat very dangerous diseases, that incentive also lies in our paradigm, which means these doctors won't even enter the medical field in the first place because they never have that exit clause. What is the trade-off? The trade-off will be, in either side, your patients with dangerous diseases such as Ebola won't be cured anyway because doctors opt out. But on your side, the harm is much bigger because there are hundreds of other patients who are not infected by this contagious disease who will have lesser access to the doctors because these doctors are just less willing to opt into your medical field because you expect so unfairly for them. And then on this QI that they raised to Sarah, what if you don't cure one person and then Ebola spreads to other people? We don't think that will happen because essentially you still quarantine that person, you just don't treat them. That is not an issue in the debate. But before I move into the extension and EPOI, no. Okay. What did Sarah talk to you? Sarah's extension answers all the question about, oh, you know, it's unfair, we have a duty, we have to maximize our duty. So Sarah answered this. What is the duty of a doctor? We think a doctor is a servant to the public, which means he owes a duty to many people out there, and not only to these few people who are infected with contagious diseases. We already expect such sacrifices from these doctors of having no personal time or traveling to dangerous war zones and dangerous regions as volunteers. We think these sacrifices entails that they owe a duty to a larger population and not just a select few people. Sarah also talked to you about the discretion that we always expect the doctors to exercise, and those discretion are always based on the doctor's calculation on which lives are worth more. So, for example, when you have 4 patients coming into your ICU, which one do you treat first? Which one has a higher probability of survival? You already, in status quo, allow doctors to make such assessment. Which lives is worth more? This one person who's infected with Ebola, or the hundreds of others that I won't be able to treat if I am to contact Ebola also. Those discretion has to be further exercised in our situation. We also bring you this parallel, right? We think even the police force also, like being by virtue of being a public servant, also exercise those forms of discretion, which is why you have this like stand your ground law, which is why we seldom prosecute doctors, because they can exercise when their lives are in a situation of danger. They can shoot the person that they deem is a threat, and they won't be charged for it. We think if you allow police officers to do direct harm onto people, you would also allow doctors to refrain themselves from treating these people, because at the end utility is to ensure that you still have these personnel working out there in the field. And we also bring to you this exclusive analysis. But before 6, any POI? No. Before 6, no. What Sarah brings to you, and a very specific analysis that we bring to you in CG. How does an epidemic work, or what is the real situation in terms of an epidemic? If you look at countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, where Ebola is an epidemic, the death toll is disproportionately high, because not only people are dying from Ebola, a lot of people are also dying from just your common diseases, like having an accident, or people who are in the hospital. And those things happen. Why? Because your hospital resources are depleted because of Ebola, because your because your medical personnel are sick and unable to treat the other patients, which means we have much more people dying unnecessarily than is available or than it is necessary. And that is why we cannot allow for these things to happen. The disproportionate rise of death toll. Not only those people who are infected, but also when you allow a lot of people even people without Ebola to die because they don't have these medical personnel, you create a greater state of paranoia. And which is why our extension is very important in this debate. In the calculation of the greater utility, what happens then if we choose to force ourselves into the line of defense? You cripple the medical field essentially, because when you allow for a lot of doctors to be subjected to that harm, you allow for a lot of other patients also to die unnecessarily. And that is the crippling effect that we bring to this debate, and that is the analysis that we bring to you. Doctors are our sole hope and our sole personnel that we depend on in cases of epidemic. They are not disposable, which means we cannot easily find an alternative. We cannot easily just train other doctors to put in their places, especially doctors who are specialized in curing epidemics. We need to recalculate what we think about epidemics, and we need to rethink how we prioritize lives. We're very proud to propose.
Good. Right, thank you very much. And today's debate, let's call for second speaker to close your opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, how the closing government said to us that it is very important to retain the survivability of the doctors, ladies and gentlemen. We think we can see to the fact that it is true, ladies and gentlemen, and how on our paradigm that we also protect both sides, both stakeholders, the doctors and also the patients, right? When we have to know how the importance of the survivability of the doctors. We don't want the doctors to die at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. We have to know how the transmission of the disease itself, for example, Ebola. For example, the Ebola is transmitting through touching the liquid from the patient towards the doctor, ladies and gentlemen, from one person to one person. Then you get Ebola, ladies and gentlemen. It's as easy as that. Then the doctors have these guidelines in order to prevent themselves from getting contracting this disease, ladies and gentlemen, in the first place. For example, they have to wear proper attire, they have their own medication, they have their own things in order to protect themselves from having this kind of contagious disease, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, under their paradigm, they saying that just because these countries, for example, Liberia and Africa, or whole African countries, are lacking of equipment, ladies and gentlemen, so we don't have to send doctors to this country. So let the people die, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that this is more harmful, because this is where the roles of the developed countries comes into the picture, ladies and gentlemen. For example, how United States and also China send their doctors to Africa in order to curb or to help African countries in order to prevent Ebola, ladies and gentlemen. How these countries bring their own equipment even though they know that in this country they are lacking of equipment, but they bring the equipment into this country in order to cure, in order to give them the standard medication, ladies and gentlemen. How under their paradigm, without having the foreign aid, for example, from US and also and China, ladies and gentlemen, and how these countries would think that it's okay for them not to send doctors, because the doctors themselves in their country will reject the proposal of the government to send the doctors to this country, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the doctors that in the countries themselves, the countries themselves, ladies and gentlemen, pledge the duty to contribute towards the countries. For example, we can take a look at the armed forces, how these armed forces, yes, they have the risk to die at the end of the day because they want to defend the country, ladies and gentlemen, but that is not the first phase that they want to face, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing that they have to do is that they have to defend their country first, and the probability of death is out of the picture, ladies and gentlemen. So even if there is a probability of death, ladies and gentlemen, we think that the death of these professionals are being applauded by the whole nations because of the humanitarian aid that they have done, ladies and gentlemen. Sit down first. How under their paradigm also they will undermine the research and development, ladies and gentlemen. How the doctors will in the first place will not willingly send themselves to this country because they think that there are greater risks and whatnot, ladies and gentlemen. How are we gonna have a cure when you do not send the doctors, professionals to this country to physically be in that country, to treat physically with a patient, to know what are the symptoms and what are the causes of the disease, and then to come up with a decision or to come up with a cure, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that this is a very important point where the doctors themselves can empower the research and development in their countries, especially in developed countries, so that they can cure other diseases in the future. And then under their paradigm, the opening government said that this gonna encourage the private hospitals' fees to decrease. We don't see this, ladies and gentlemen. How it's gonna be decreasing when the doctors know, the private doctors know the risk that they are facing, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, they're gonna charge more fees for the patients, for these contagious patients to get their treatment, ladies and gentlemen. And then under the clause and also talk about how it will undermine the responsibility and also the obligations of the NGO, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think so, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because in the sense of humanity, like she does it, how this country, how without rejection from the doctors, these developed countries, for example, US and UK or China, will send their professionals to this country without any rejection from the doctors. And there is a collaboration between the developed countries and also NGO on the health of humans at large, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
If a country like Sierra Leone can force all the doctors to go into crisis with contagious diseases, why would people want to collaborate with Sierra Leone, or why would people want to be doctors in the first place in these countries?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is about risk and harm that they're going to face at the end of the day. We already taken a look at the how the check and balances of the doctors to wear the proper attire in order to prevent this thing, ladies and gentlemen. What they have gotten is about how the doctor, the sole doctor from America that has been infected by the disease, the probability is because of the negligence from the doctor itself. You cannot, you have to consider the fact that the negligence from the doctors that could be infected from this disease, ladies and gentlemen. So we take a look at some of the cases. For example, the rights, the chance to escape, and also the duty of care of the doctors themselves. How under their paradigm they will create more gap between the doctor and the infected the patients, ladies and gentlemen. For example, under their paradigm, they say that one doctor will you sacrifice one doctor to treat 100 patients, ladies and gentlemen. And then how you're gonna cater to this matter when one doctor rejects to participate in this voluntarism, ladies and gentlemen. It will cause more patients to be cured by one doctor, ladies and gentlemen. Under their paradigm also, they will never give the potentials towards the patients themselves. When the patients themselves have the right to know what is the stage of the severity of their disease in the first place. When you provide this kind of voluntarism, compulsory voluntarism, so at least they know what they can do at the end of the day, and then at the end of the day they can avoid any formal interaction and whatnot. With that, we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for the debate. For the floor, shake hands. Ms. Anaya, please.